Okay, so I just want to remind you that, again, this is a longer essay. This is 2 to 3 pages or 500 word minimum, and all of the normal formatting stipulations. And I also want to remind you that in the rubric, it asks that the writer uses specific examples and descriptions to show rather than tell of emotions or events. This is the part I want you to focus on as you are drafting and as you are revising, is getting that description in there. So I went ahead and wrote up my own personal essay based on that outline that I showed you last week. And first I wrote a plain version without description, and then I went through and revised it, well, expanded it into a real draft, into a 2 to 3 page paper. So let's head over there. Here's my first draft that didn't work so well. It's mostly a summary, and I'll read it to you real quick. A year ago, I was able to marry my best friend in the temple of God. 7 of my siblings have strong feelings against the church, though, and I was worried that they would not support me in my decision to marry in the temple. Notice I'm just telling you. I'm telling you what happened. Some of my siblings were upset that they wouldn't be able to attend the actual ceremony. However, in the end, every single one of my siblings came to the temple grounds that morning and showed their love for me and my fiancé before we went into the temple. In that moment, I realized that our family could have deep, loving connections despite our religious differences. Okay, so there's a summary of my paper. Notice I've even got the conclusion here where I state my thesis or my main point. If you remember from my outline, I wanted my thesis to be that even with religious differences, a family can feel united through love. So I mentioned that here at the end, but it's still one paragraph, not 2 to 3 pages, and it isn't descriptive. It just tells the bare bones of the events. So to expand on these bare bones and make it into a descriptive, engaging, powerful essay, well, let's see what I did. So coming down here, I went ahead and color-coded things to help you see what I've done to expand on that. In bold, I have where I describe what I'm doing. I'm describing action, or I'm describing something with the 5 senses, something you can do, something you can see, something you can hear or taste or smell. And those 5 senses, if you focus on those, will really flesh out your paper. So everything in bold should be a descriptive moment. Then I've done my reflection in green. That's where I comment on the experience and show the reader how that is tying back to my thesis, how that is unraveling the point I want to make. I've highlighted dialogue because to me dialogue is a great way to use the 5 senses. It's something you can hear so clearly, and it shows the personality of the character who is speaking. It also conveys information, but in a more powerful and emotional way. So those are the three indicators I've used to show you what I'm doing with this essay. Okay. So I'm going to start reading, and I might pause to point things out, but I'll show you how I'm using description to flesh out my essay. I spun in a little circle beside the car. All right, first line, I'm already having me do something. I'm spinning in a circle. That lets you know I'm excited without having to say, I was super excited. It was my wedding day. I just have to say, I spun in a little circle, and you know I'm excited. My fiancé and I had just arrived at the Timpanogos temple. My little white dress was simple, with just a little lace along the sleeves, meant to let me focus on the monumental purpose of that day. I grabbed my temple bag with one hand and my fiancé's fingers with the other. Okay, notice again, I'm using a little action, a little description to transition to the next moment as excitement built in me. Around us, my siblings were emerging from their respective cars. Matt wore a black button-up shirt with his jeans, and Kevin was in a bright green sports shirt. Kevin's wife, Michelle, was striking in a dark green sleeveless dress. My sister Tara wore a beautiful white tunic with her green pants and buzzed head. Okay, so this is a lot of description of clothing, and normally I don't encourage you to focus on clothing for an entire paragraph. But I have a reason to be including this description, and as you describe things, ask yourself, is this description furthering the purpose of my essay? And I've tried to do that, and I will show you. I grinned as I picked out each of my 9 siblings. Only 2 would enter the temple with me that day, but all of them were still there. All 9 siblings had come from across the country for their youngest, still Mormon sister. Okay, so I think I could have stated it a little more plainly now that I'm reading it out loud to you. That's why reading it out loud is such a great way to proofread. But what I'm trying to do here is show you that all of my siblings are no longer Mormon. They're wearing casual and sleeveless clothing that you can't enter the temple with. So this was my way of showing you a contrast, of showing you me and my husband ready to go into the temple, and my siblings obviously there for a different purpose. So that was meant to be the purpose behind my description, and in my reflection I tried to tell you that. Maybe I could have been more clear, but this is still a good pattern to follow. Okay? Just 3 months ago this had seemed impossible. 3 months ago, I had been sitting with my back against the rough brick of my apartment complex, with my cell phone pressed against my ear. Okay, here's another transition. Like I said in my last video, I like to use flashbacks to help me get in more information without having to start talking, to start telling instead of showing. If I just flash back, I can show you what happened and then come back to the future. So here I've let you know that I'm going 3 months back. I'm letting you know it's a flashback. And then I start showing you what's happening. I'm giving you lots of sensory description. I'm sitting with my back against a rough brick apartment. That's something you can feel. Cold seeped through my coat and jeans as I listened to Tara's raised voice. I sat silently, my face contorted and tear-streaked. Again, notice I didn't have to say, I felt scared and upset. I just showed you. I said, I sat silently, my face contorted and tear-streaked. I tried to show you the emotion. Of course I'm upset, her voice was saying. I'm going to miss my own sister's wedding. The church just wants us to sit placidly outside and wait. We were all Mormons before. It isn't like they're hiding anything from us. Okay, so notice how this description tells you a lot about my sister in a very short amount of time, while also helping you as a reader experience her. You're hearing her, you're feeling her emotions. So that's why I believe dialogue is a great way to add description and to draw a reader into the moment. I hadn't spoken in the last 10 minutes. I had known this reaction was coming, and I felt powerless to respond to it. My free hand clenched as I fought for something to say. But will you still come? I finally choked out. There was a sigh over the phone. What is it you want, Law? Tara said. The fight had gone out of her voice. All I just want to feel the love of my family that day. I want you to be the ones who send me into the temple. Pause. All right then, let's see what we can do. So I notice again that was a very kind of brief exchange of dialogue, but again it gave a lot of information in a moment. And then I transitioned back to the present by saying, and now here she was. Here they all were in the very parking lot of a Mormon temple. Okay, so there's the end of my flashback. I will skip the rest of my essay for time's sake and come to the conclusion. And remember, this is where we're supposed to really reflect on the experiences that have been shared and help drive it home as a meaningful point, as something that the reader can identify with and that can perhaps change how they view things. So here I say, that day, my husband and I received quiet, real love from every member of my family. The temple stood behind my siblings like a silent spear, a symbol to many of them of the wounds that they had felt from the church. And yet, in its shadow, they chose to give their dearest pieces of wisdom to me and my fiancé. Somehow that day I was bathed in the love of both my siblings and my God. Though they did not love my God, they loved me, and each gave his or her unique blessing to send us into that God's house. Okay, so that's how I chose to conclude. Notice I didn't directly say my thesis. It's okay if you do want to directly state your thesis here in the conclusion, but you can also imply it, like I did, and talk about that feeling, try to encapsulate it, and show the readers how this experience is demonstrating that thesis. Here I'm trying to say, look at what my siblings did for me, even though we have religious differences. Look how much they loved me, and that didn't stand in the way of anything that day. We could just be a family. So that's an example of how you could draft out your essay. I hope this has given you some ideas for how to include description, action, things that you do, and dialogue and reflection. One last tip is the way I help myself focus on description is to imagine that I'm filming a movie, that I've got the video camera in my hands, and I get to choose where does that camera focus? What is important to the moment? Am I zooming in on her face? Am I seeing the way the wind tosses her hair? Am I seeing those tight lines around her mouth as she frowns and feels the momentum of this moment? What am I choosing to focus on? What am I going to show in this movie, in this essay? So that can be one way to help yourself focus on description. Again, I hope this has been helpful. If you want any help drafting, please let me know. I would love to work with you on your papers through a video call, a phone call, email, whatever works for you. Just let me know how I can help.